Today's hearing is part of the Kentucky Student Voice Team's Rose Revival campaign, which we launched in 2023. What is Rose, you might be wondering? The court didn't just critique the system, but it demanded what an adequate education must include. It outlined 7 essential capacities that every Kentucky student is constitutionally entitled to develop. Those capacities include strong communication skills, civic preparedness, understanding of governmental processes, preparation for college or career, knowledge of mental and physical wellness, academic and vocational competence, and crucially important for today, a sufficient grounding in the arts and in Kentucky's cultural and historical heritage. You can see those 7 capacities on the banner here. Arts and cultural education are not extras under Rose. They're not electives we fund only when there's room in the budget. Under Rose, they are embedded in the constitutional definition of adequacy. Our Rose Revival campaign asked a simple but urgent question. 36 years later, and now that our generation is the one attending Kentucky's public schools, is the promise of Rose being fulfilled? After over a year of research, public forums, student surveys, and consultation with educators and allies, we concluded that it is not. In January 2025, we filed Kentucky Student Voice Team vs. Commonwealth of Kentucky, alleging that the state has failed to provide students with the adequate and equitable education required by the Kentucky Student and Rose decision. As we stand here today, that litigation is moving forward in Franklin County Circuit Court. Last month, the court's Judge Shepard denied the defendant's motions to dismiss on all accounts, meaning that our litigation can go to trial. While this is a substantial procedural win, we know that is also the first step in a lengthy court process. And we also know that systemic change does not happen in courtrooms alone. It happens when communities come together to reflect, imagine, and insist on better. So that's why we are here today. This hearing is part of our broader effort to deeply engage the public in envisioning what a constitutionally compliant education system could and should look like. Today, we will hear testimony from former educators and arts advocates about the current state of arts access, funding disparities, instructional time, and the policy barriers facing arts programs across the Commonwealth. Following each testimony, student examiners will ask follow-up questions, and then we will open the floor for audience engagement. This is part of building the public record, strengthening civic dialogue, and making space for young people and community members to shape what educational adequacy means in 2026. Thank you for being here. Before I ground us in where arts and cultural education stand in Kentucky today, I want to begin by acknowledging the arts educators in the room. If you are or were an arts educator in music, theater, visual arts, dance, media arts, or any creative discipline, would you please stand or raise your hand? Let's give them a round of applause. The work you do shapes how students see themselves and what they believe they are capable of becoming. Arts classrooms are often where students find their voice for the first time. Sometimes they are the only space where students are fully seen. So for that, we thank you. The Rose decision recognized that an adequate education includes more than literacy and math proficiency. It includes a sufficient grounding in the arts to enable a student to understand what their own cultural and historical heritage. Even prior to the 1989 Rose decision, Kentucky elementary and middle schools were required to dedicate a minimum number of instructional minutes each week to arts and cultural education, and high schools were required to offer multi-level coursework in the arts. After Rose, the Kentucky Education Reform Act strengthened those protections. Beginning in 1993, Kentucky's statewide accountability system included standardized assessments in the arts. Students were required to align instruction with state arts standards, and student learning in the arts became part of how overall school performance was evaluated. During that period, many districts provided regular access to arts instruction. In 2005, 135 of Kentucky's 176 school districts responded to a statewide survey on arts and cultural education, reflecting broad engagement with arts programming across the state. But over time, the structures that once protected arts and education in Kentucky have been weakened. In 2017, the General Assembly eliminated arts program reviews. According to the Kentucky School Boards Association, that change effectively removed arts and cultural education from the state accountability system. Today, schools are required to follow Kentucky academic standards and ensure students meet minimum content requirements in the arts to graduate. But beyond that, accountability is limited. Schools submit forms indicating how many certified arts instructors they employ and at the high school level, which approved art courses they offer. There is no statewide reporting on instructional time, no minimum access guarantee to elementary or middle school level, no accountability mechanism to ensure consistent quality or opportunity. As a result, decisions about whether and how to prioritize arts and cultural education have largely been left to individual districts and schools, and that has created significant variation across Kentucky. Some students have access to robust music programs in theater, visual arts, and media arts throughout their K-12 experience. Others encounter limited instruction, especially in elementary and middle school, or must compete with scheduling constraints and staffing shortages. Kentucky currently has no statewide accountability system for arts access in elementary or middle schools, and at the high school level, only one arts credit is required to graduate. So we are left with a fundamental question. If the Constitution requires that every student receive an education that prepares them for civic participation and cultural understanding, can we say that standard is being met when access to arts education depends on a student's zip code? Today is about exploring what it would take to ensure that arts and cultural education are treated not as optional programming, but as essential components of a Rose-compliant education system. To get that conversation started, I'm now going to hand it over to Aubrey Nice, who is going to introduce our first witness.
Thank you, Georgie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aubrey Nice, and I'm a senior at Davis County High School. We are now moving into the heart of today's hearing, testimony from our expert witnesses and examination by our student examiners. Georgie has helped ground us in the current state of arts and the cultural education in Kentucky and the ways our system has stripped it from those protections that once existed. Now we turn towards solutions. What would it take to rebuild a system where arts education is foundational? What would it take to align policy, accountability, and funding with the constitutional promise outlined in Rose? To help us explore those questions, we are honored to welcome a panel of leaders whose careers have helped us to be devoted to arts education, public service, and cultural leadership in Kentucky. First up, we'll be calling Jane Dewey. Jane recently retired after a 25-year career as Director of Arts Education for Danville Independent Schools. Her many recognitions include the Kentucky Governor's Award and the Arts for Arts Education in 2021, and the Kennedy Center and National School Boards Association Award for Outstanding Arts Education in 2019 on behalf of the Danville schools. Throughout her career, Jane has championed one core belief, that all students, regardless of background, deserve access to high-quality arts education. Next will be Philip Shepard. And just to clarify, this is a different Philip Shepard than Judge Shepard, who is connected to our litigation in the courtroom. This Philip Shepard is accomplished in his own right. Phil is a retired arts educator and administrator with 47 years of dedication to arts education in both Kentucky and California. He spent 17 years in the classroom teaching music, visual art, creative movement, and theater before moving into leadership roles. He has served as chair of the Education Committee for the Kentuckians for the Arts, Executive Director of Kentuckians for the Arts, Fine Arts Coordinator for Fayette County Public Schools, Arts and Humanities Consultant for the Kentucky Department of Education, and he served as a project director for the National Coalition for Core Art Standards, guiding the development of the standards in use today. In his spare time, Phil plays trumpet in Madison Community Band, which feels fitting for someone who has spent a lifetime ensuring others have access to music. The third witness we will call is Heather Lyons. Heather recently retired as Director of Arts and Culture in the Office of the Mayor for the City of Lexington. In that role, she created Lexington's Public Art Master Plan and launched new programs and funding opportunities for local artists and organizations. Previously, she served as Individual Artist Director for the Kentucky Arts Council, Executive Director of the Living Arts and Science Center, and an independent producer and director of award-winning Arts Center documentary films. For over 2 decades, Heather has worked as media artist in residence in schools and communities across Kentucky, bridging arts, education, and civic life. And finally, our panel will be questioning Paula Lockhart. Paula is an active theater artist and educator in the Louisville community. She holds dual bachelor's degrees in theater and communication from Wesleyan College, as well as an MFA from the University of Louisville. Prior to joining the Governor's School for Arts as Associate Director, Paula served as Assistant Manager of Visitor Service at the Muhammad Ali Center. She currently teaches at Commonwealth Theater Center and at the Simmons College of Kentucky, Louisville's only historically Black college. Her career reflects the powerful intersection of performance, education, and cultural heritage. We will now move on to our examination.
Good afternoon. My name is Charlie Kincaid, and I'm a junior at Danville High School. We would like to start the examination portion of our hearing by calling our first witness to the table, Miss Jane Dewey. Thank you again for being here today. Please begin your testimony whenever you are ready.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation about the importance of arts in education. In Shakespeare's As You Like It, the character of Jacques states all the world's a stage, describing the journey of human life that could also apply to the journey of the original Rose decision and the recent subsequent Rose Revival campaign spearheaded by you all, the Kentucky Student Voice team, and the reason we joined together today. I became an arts educator in Kentucky just a few years after the original decision and grew to see how that decision benefited my students, providing them with increasingly rich visual and performing arts experiences. An important question to ask then, as the Student Voice team has, is about the status of arts education in our public school now, or as Jacques might ask, is arts education in Kentucky currently sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything? I stumbled into arts education from a career as a working theater artist and stayed primarily, I think, because of the community and the relationships that visual and performing arts education offers, and because I love stories and enjoy working with students. Stories help us understand our place in the world, what we think, what we believe, and ask us to understand others, to build empathetic responses to those who hold different cultures and beliefs. Through the stories a painting or statue tell us, the emotions felt in a piece of music or dance, and the ability of theater to make us laugh, cry, and think, the arts can put students in the driver's seat. The arts communicate. I was lucky. As director of arts education for the Danville Independent School System, my purpose was simple: creating high-quality arts education opportunities for all students. Did I say I was lucky? I worked in a district that had long valued arts education. The Rose decision and the Kentucky Educational Reform Act accountability simply accelerated that long-held principle in the Danville schools that arts education is good for kids, that music, dance, visual arts, and theater, and now media arts provide students unique opportunities to express themselves, develop creative and critical thinking skills, engage and connect more deeply with community and school-based learning opportunities, and to develop social-emotional learning skills. From the 1990s through 2009, when Senate Bill 1 removed the arts from testing accountability, resources were put in place to assist schools in reaching the learning capacity articulated in Kentucky Revised Statute 158.645, sufficient grounding in the arts to enable each student to appreciate his or her cultural and historical heritage. That learning capacity has teeth, requiring teachers with strong content and pedagogy knowledge, budgets that provide equipment, supplies, field trips, and artist residencies, and the willingness among school, district, and statewide educational leadership and legislators to consider the arts as core subjects and elevate them to that status. 3 facts and 1 story. I mentioned that resources were put in place to assist schools following the Rose decision, and I learned that particular advocacy fundamental through 2 organizations that were instrumental in providing support for rigorous, high-quality arts education: Kentucky Performing Arts and the Kentucky Arts Council. I observed success in arts education across the Commonwealth. Week-long arts academies offering high-quality teacher education and learning in the arts. A robust teaching artist program offered through the Kentucky Arts Council, arts education resources developed by the Kentucky Educational Television, and annual teacher and student conferences offered through arts educators' professional organizations. I have more than 1 story of the value of arts education, as do all visual and performing arts educators. We see almost daily examples. And the students, their families, my colleagues, and the communities all know of these successes. For me, it's the student who appears in a photo on the front page of the paper when outside demonstrators show up to protest a performance at their high school. It's students exploring an exhibit of the AIDS quilt before seeing a performance of the Yellow Boat. It's the students who attend a meeting of the Joint Legislative Education Committee of the Kentucky Legislature to support a fellow student who is testifying to what arts education has meant to her life. It's the students who run a weekly showcase who must plan and implement auditions, rehearsals, communication, organization, technical elements, and performance. It's the students who help create a community Halloween exhibit of giant skeletons, dragons, and other ghouls. It's the students who are invited to be part of the choral festival at Carnegie Hall. It's the exhibit of student visual art and poetry in a packed gallery at the local library. It's the student who has taken 4 years of an art form and puts together a presentation of their growth over those years to fulfill requirements for the locally developed Seal of Arts Excellence. It's a Spanish-speaking student who sees themselves on stage in a production about an immigrant family from Mexico. It's the student who helps their school get a grant from Music Theater International by writing a letter of support. It's the Governor's School for the Arts attendees who come back and share their knowledge with their peers, and many, many more stories. In 2007, folk singer Tom Chapin sang, "With rules but no funding, they're caught in a bind, so music and art and the things you love best are not in your school, because they're not on the test." Accountability for teaching the arts was revised from a paper and pencil test to a program review model, and accountability was later eliminated. While testing may provide an incomplete picture of student knowledge, and the program reviews that followed were only just gaining educator buy-in and understanding when they too were abolished, those methods of accountability ensured that the arts were part of regular student instruction and that programs were evaluated for their quality and effectiveness. Kentucky statutes regarding arts education still stand, but currently there is minimal reporting and little accountability. Other accountability measures, career tech ed reporting, testing data, graduation rate, all of which have value, which contribute to schools' overall ratings, have remained and in some cases increased. For every story that I have of arts education success, there are stories of accountability in other areas taking priority. For example, high school students unable to take 4 years of art study due to a school's accountability priorities. Stories of elementary students who have one specials class each week in the visual and performing arts, meaning about 16 45-minute classes to explore all 5 arts disciplines in one semester. And stories of middle schools where choir, band, and visual arts are offered, but the student must choose between visual and performing arts classes, or computer science, or advanced physical education, or world language classes, or mandated interventions in reading and math. A 2023 Americans for the Arts study measured arts and culture's impact on many aspects of our society, including arts education. Among its findings, 9 in 10 American adults believe that the arts are essential to a well-rounded education. Only 52% agree that students have enough opportunities to take classes in the arts, leaving almost half of those surveyed saying that there aren't enough school-based arts opportunities. 83% of those surveyed support government funding of arts education programs in schools for grades pre-K through 12. These findings help illustrate a belief that I've long held. People do understand the value of the arts and overwhelmingly want arts education to be a fully funded part of public education. Recently, a Kentucky education organization did a deep dive analysis into statewide data sets from the Kentucky State Report Card. While currently in draft form, key findings from the 2024-25 school year include only 17% of Kentucky schools provided instruction in all 5 arts disciplines. Where a student lived, had significant impact on whether or not they had access to arts education opportunities. On most measures, suburban schools outperformed rural schools, and students in southeastern Kentucky had significantly less arts education access than their peers statewide. Low poverty schools provided significantly more arts education opportunities and administrative resources than high poverty schools. And the following student groups had less access to arts opportunities than their peers: students experiencing homelessness, students in foster care, students with disabilities, English language learners, and African American students. For all the success stories, that I have observed and been part of over my 30-year arts education career, these findings stand in stark contrast. So what do we do? How do we honor the statute that made strides in making arts education in Kentucky stronger and more equitable? The answer may lie in learning from our successes and in moving beyond lip service to high-quality arts education. In 2019, a bill was brought to the Joint Education Committee entitled the Arts Education Equity Act. It required 100 minutes of arts education each week for K through 8th grade students. It did not make it out of committee. Enact a similar requirement. Require that arts teachers have content knowledge. Arts classes must be taught by teachers who are certified in those artistic disciplines, or if no qualified applicants exist, require that teachers hired without arts certification be mentored by a certified arts teacher in that discipline and receive a minimum amount of professional development annually in that artistic discipline. Provide high schools accountability ratings for students who complete 4 years of sequential curriculum based on Kentucky academic standards in the visual and performing arts and complete a capstone project during their senior year. Provide elementary and middle schools similar opportunities to add to their accountability scores by providing students equitable access to high-quality arts education. And fund all public schools adequately. Data shows the public believes in arts education. With adequate funding, schools will provide high-quality arts education for all students. KET recently aired the documentary Shriners, Voices from Owsley County, a story of students, educators, and artists creating a play that focused on identity, community, and hope. The film has received praise and awards, and the play itself reminds us of the power of storytelling, the power of the arts to impact both artists and viewers. I offer up this example of success in arts education as both a celebration of the transformative power of the arts and a beacon of hope for the future of arts education. What a wonder it might be if every school district in the Commonwealth recognized and harnessed the power of the arts for all students. Arts education can and should be strengthened. Recently, another step towards making the arts count was taken by Kentucky Representative Steve Bratcher, who filed House Bill 591, an act relating to a performing arts career pathway, putting a performing arts pathway into statewide career and technical education. This could be another step in making arts education flourish in our high schools. All the world's a stage, and it is time for the arts to find their theatrical light and shine across the Commonwealth as they did following the initial Rose decision. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your incredibly powerful testimony, Ms. Dewey. The passion you have for your work and the clear understanding you have of this field is evident. And I'd love to dive into that understanding with a few questions. First, in your prior experience as the Director of Arts Education for the Danville Independent School District, how did you see students' socioeconomic status impacting arts opportunities? If there were any disparities, how did you work to minimize them? And from that experience, what do you think the state should do to make arts education equally accessible to all, regardless of their socioeconomic status?
So we're talking about barriers to student learning, right? And what great questions these are, and these are questions that educators confront every day. Free public schools and equal access to education were part of the original 13 colonies. As public educators, we're asked to work to that promise of equal opportunities for all students and to meet each and every student where they are in every content area. As you have alluded to, our students come to the classroom with different backgrounds and learning experiences. And one of the marks of a successful educator is helping each student grow regardless of where they begin. So let's take a moment and dream of fully funding public schools. Schools were rich and developed dance, media arts, music, theater, and visual arts learning experience stand side by side with learning in other content areas. They're taught in standalone classes where students develop their skills and talents, and they're integrated. They're integrated across other content areas. Now, there would still be discrepancies in what students bring to the table, and in fact, those very discrepancies, that diversity, is what many public schools embrace. Fully funding public schools provides educators the resources needed to meet their school's learning needs in all areas, including the visual and performing arts. President Biden's Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, said, "At its best, public education is the great equalizer, putting opportunity within reach for all Americans." We don't have fully funded public schools, so we look for creative solutions to provide resources for all students to reach their full potential. So a few of the solutions that I've implemented or observed in this area include partnerships. Partnerships are essential to providing rich opportunities for students. For the Danville schools, they've included partnerships with the Norton Center that provides free tickets for some of our students to attend matinees. They were instrumental in having a concert on our stage in our schools with Yo-Yo Ma and the Silk Road Ensemble. Partnerships with various organizations that provide the annual Frank X. Walker Creative Arts Festival, and many, many other partnerships. It's important to develop other funding streams. Booster and other support groups, advocacy for funding at the district level, and grant writing efforts have provided funding to do things like put instruments in the hands of all band students, allowed students to be part of once-in-a-lifetime arts experiences, and provided visual art materials during the pandemic to all students from the school, and creative leadership. During my time in the schools, the Gifted and Talented Coordinator and I, with the blessing of the Chief Academic Officer, created a more authentic Gifted and Talented identification system in the visual and performing arts. Implementing that system allowed for greater socioeconomic and racial diversity among the students identified, and allowed us to provide services to a more diverse group of students.
Thank you so much for that answer, Ms. Stewie. My second question is, in Kentucky, the sole requirement for elementary school teachers to teach art is a single 3-hour course that is taken during one's undergraduate program. This is starkly different from other states, such as Washington, which requires specialized art certification, and West Virginia, which requires elementary teachers to complete up to 6 credits of college-level arts education in order to teach art. What do you think the requirements should be in Kentucky, and are there any approaches we should borrow from other states?
Again, a very good question, because we teach what we know. We teach best what we know. And when they're asked what they teach, teachers usually reply, "I teach kids." But we do it through content. And educators are, more often than not, highly educated professionals with a toolbox of skills, ranging from classroom management to creative problem solving to content knowledge. So again, we need to face the realities of public education. Can we learn from other states? Absolutely yes. Could there be better ways to equip visual and performing arts teachers? Of course. You mentioned 2 models. A few others include certification in New Jersey, Tennessee, and Illinois. And right here, We have standalone certification in K-12 music and visual arts, which probably doesn't surprise anyone, but we also have standalone teacher certification in K-12 theater and dance. That may come as more of a surprise to some of you. Here's the thing. The benefits of high-quality arts education cannot be achieved without teachers with specific content knowledge in the arts area. In addition to what you mentioned in your question, secondary English teachers are certified to teach theater, and K-12 physical education teachers are qualified to teach dance, although the reverse, theater teachers teaching English, for example, is not permitted. So here's what I propose. Provide standards-based, high-quality arts education programs for all students to allow them to see that teaching the arts is a valuable and viable career option. Encourage higher education programs in K-12 arts education, including theater and dance. Teachers must pass, this is ed speak, a lot of you in the room know this, but not everyone, must pass praxis exams in their teaching areas to be certified to teach in those areas. Require schools to hire certified visual and performing arts teachers in all visual and performing arts areas. While this is being put into place, require professional learning for all teachers teaching outside of their credentialed areas. So for example, the middle school certified English teacher teaching theater classes would have 12 to 16 hours of professional learning in the area of theater to strengthen their content knowledge and pedagogy. And make these last two bullets part of school accountability, providing an incentive for schools to provide high-quality, standards-based arts education. You can't teach what you don't know.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dewey, for being here today. That is all the time we have. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all of us. And while you rejoin the audience, I'll pass it off to Ronan, who will introduce our next witness.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ronan White, and I'm a senior at Trinity High School in Louisville. We will now start the examination of our second witness, Mr. Philip Shepard, the former executive director for Kentuckians for the Arts. Welcome, Mr. Shepard, and thank you so much for your time being here today. Please begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I'd like to offer thanks to the Kentucky Student Voice team for making this kind of event happen for all of us. It's a very important action that you're taking, and I think it's going to help to promote the arts statewide and strengthen arts education. So thank you for doing that. And I didn't realize you're going to read bios, so I'll skip that part of my testimony. But I will reiterate that I've been at this for 47 years, and I'm not done yet. We got to keep going. We have to keep voicing our support for the arts, no matter what. And I'll also say, yeah, that I am not Judge Philip Shepard. I'm the other guy. We do have an equity issue in Kentucky at this time when it comes to the arts and in education. Some schools offer comprehensive arts education while others lack instruction in one or more art forms or have no art classes at all. A forthcoming report on the state of the arts in Kentucky public schools uses data from each school to highlight disparities in access to arts education throughout the state. I suggest that you keep your eyes open for this upcoming report. There are certain remedies for this inequity in arts education across the state. First, districts need to ensure that all schools within their district have the same offerings in arts education. In one district I worked in recently, a site-based decision-making council at an elementary school decided not to offer visual art classes to students and used that funding instead to offer Spanish classes. Although arts are legally required, there is no mandate for world languages in elementary schools. The arts have minimum standards and regulation defined in the Visual and Performing Arts Academic Standards adopted by the Kentucky Board of Education. The District Board of Education received protest about this decision, but it determined that it lacked authority over the SBDM Council in this matter. Under SBDM law, those councils have authority over curriculum at the school level. State law takes precedence over SBDM Council laws, and the council must comply with state laws and regulations. However, in this case, this SBDM Council authority was placed above state statute. The district should ensure that all students have equal access to mandated arts education as required by statutes and regulations. For example, one district in Kentucky classifies the arts as district-wide programs for elementary schools, which means that every school has music and visual art teachers provided at no extra cost to the individual schools. Physical education classes are covered by the dance teachers, and theater is covered by English language arts certified teachers. It is the responsibility of the state legislators to monitor and implement the statutes. Currently in Kentucky, there is no system in place for this monitoring to take place. With the elimination of arts assessment and program reviews, there is no longer a way to directly monitor implementation or measurement of arts instruction in the state. There is one tool that could be useful to help monitor the implementation of arts education, the school report card. Each school in Kentucky responds to questions in the report to provide data about school programs, including the arts. This data collection can provide insight into what individual school programs look like, as well as statewide views. Using this data to pinpoint gaps and needs in arts education makes it a valuable tool for driving improvements. To date, this data is not being used for that purpose. As you heard Jane say, 9 out of 10 Americans believe the arts are vital to providing a well-rounded education. Multiple studies have shown that engagement in the arts in schools can improve academic performance in all academic areas. The arts can also help to increase attendance and graduation rates, impact civic-minded behaviors, and decrease disciplinary infractions. Engagement in the arts promotes social and emotional well-being and reduces other health risks. The arts provide avenues for young people to shape and express their identities, gain empathy, and better understand and engage with the world around them. The arts are an excellent way for students to develop creative skills and skills necessary for success in life, such as goal setting, communication skills, perseverance and self-discipline, and teamwork. I have personally experienced the power of the arts repeatedly while working with students of the arts, both young and old. Over the years, many of the students I worked with had regular attendance at school only because of arts classes in which they were enrolled. Many of them told me that they would not come to school if it were not for my class, and they looked forward to participating and working with the other students in the class. Over my 17 years in the classroom, I never had problematic issues with discipline in my class, My students were always engaged, excited, positive about what we were doing each day. They were successful, and that success transferred to other aspects of their life. I recall a student who entered my band program as a freshman in high school. He was shy, withdrawn, and unfriendly toward others in the band. His skill level in making music was low, and he did not seem to be engaged in the class. Several of my other students expressed concern about this, and I told them that we should treat him like we do all of our band members. If he needs help with anything, offer help. Let him know when we appreciate his work, and stay positive. It was not long before we noticed changes in him. His outlook became positive, and he began to enjoy collaborating with others in the class. His music skills improved exponentially, and eventually he developed into a leader in a band program. Today, he's an extraordinarily successful entrepreneur. His hard work and success in the band taught him how to be successful in life. He will be the first one to tell you that his band experience is the reason for his success. And all the arts offer that kind of opportunity. The parents of our students in arts programs in our schools do not need to be convinced of their value. The value is highly observable as they see their children make art, perform, and grow as individuals. Students who participate in arts programs are also believers because they experience learning and growth firsthand and understand the value of the arts in their lives. Still, that 1 out of 10 needs to be convinced of the value of arts education. Some of those people are in leadership and policy-making roles and have influence on what's happening in our schools. It is that 10% we need to convince. To do that, we need to invite them to be a part of the art making that goes on in our schools. We need to have them on hand when all the wonderful experiences in the arts are happening and give them opportunity to interact with parents and students at arts events and performances. A large part of my tenure in as the Arts and Humanities consultant in Kentucky at the Kentucky Department of Education involved working directly with the mandated arts assessment for the state. I served as the point person for assessment, developing and monitoring from 2001 through 2009. And during that time, I had the opportunity to work with and visit schools across the state to observe how the core content for assessment was being used to prepare students for the state test. Schools were held accountable for the arts instruction through the assessment, so all of them had a strong interest in improving achievement in the arts. A school's accountability score was difficult to improve without improving the score for arts and humanities. About a third of the core content for assessment involved historical and cultural content that was consistent across all 4 art forms that were on the assessment. That would be dance, theater, music, and visual art at that time. This historical and cultural content was also aligned with the standards of social studies that were in place at that time. English language arts standards connected with visual and performing arts standards, particularly in the area of theater. Many elementary schools in Kentucky took advantage of this opportunity for collaboration and integration of content and created instructional programs that were exceptional, which I was able to observe as I traveled across the state. I served as a grant reviewer for the U.S. Department of Education for several years. Most of the grant proposals I read were for creating instructional programs featuring arts integration across the curriculum in schools or districts or with partnering districts, neighboring districts. A number of these proposals offered highly innovative models for accomplishing arts integration. I'm just sorry I couldn't follow up to see how these have been implemented. As a reviewer, I didn't have that opportunity. And the Education Reform Act of 1990 was based on equity in Kentucky schools. The Supreme Court ruled that the Kentucky public education school system was invalid due to inequitable funding across the state. The legislature was charged with changing the system. Statutes were written that described a new system and what all Kentucky students were entitled to in a public education system. In the capacities, you'll hear this over and over, I'm sure. Listed in KRS 158645 is this statement, number 6. Sufficient grounding in the arts to enable each student to appreciate his or her cultural and historical heritage. The arts in Kentucky were considered core content areas based on the language in this statute. As a part of the monitoring process, Kentucky developed the state mandated assessments, which included the arts. And over the years, the assessment evolved in many ways, improved, as those engaged in creating assessments gained knowledge and skills in drafting assessment items. At first, schools did not take the arts seriously because they only counted for a small percentage of the overall school accountability score. As the years passed, excuse me, that changed because educators realized that even a small improvement had significant impact on the overall school accountability score. So over the years, we saw more and more concern about raising those arts and humanities scores. Kentucky was admired in the arts education world because of the statewide mandated assessment in the arts. Every school in the state had developed instructional programs to prepare students to take mandated assessment. Kentucky's assessment in the arts consisted of 96 multiple choice questions and 3 open response questions. And those questions were divided across 6 forms and also divided among the art forms of dance, music, theater, and visual art. And that's what all that the assessment was. It was pencil and paper assessment. Those, I've already said about, all assessment items were based on content in the core content for assessment, which included only the content that could be tested. So that core content for assessment was a major focus for schools. Over time, we had become particularly good at doing what we were doing. The premise that assessment drives instruction had proven to be true. Arts test scores gradually improved, but teachers increasingly were using their instructional time to teach core content for assessment. Considering limits in instructional time, that often left little room for creating and performing or doing the arts in arts classrooms. We were learning about the arts. I recall a time when an elementary school music teacher told me that her principal had visited her room a couple of weeks prior to testing dates. And after the class, he asked her, "Why are you singing?" She said, "I told him that it's a music class." To which he responded, "You should be teaching vocabulary and music facts to prepare your students for the test." That kind of sums up the trend in arts classrooms across the state at that point in time. Surveys supported that students were doing the arts less while studying about the arts more. This brought the attention of Kentucky legislators, and plans were put into place to remove the arts from state assessment. In the same law that removed the arts from state assessments, program reviews were put into place. Program reviews kept the arts in accountability and provided guidance toward building high-quality instructional programs. They worked well, but too many other programs besides the arts jumped on the bandwagon, so to say, adding their own versions of program reviews. The reviews became quite a burden for schools to complete each year because there were just too many of them. And the Kentucky legislature created statute to remove them from accountability. Now, just to kind of sum that up, we've had some really strong measures in the state of Kentucky over the years, and as you heard earlier, they were gradually removed over time. And today, we have no accountability. We have no measures that we can use to, first of all, create equity or restore what we had before. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insightful testimony, especially your comments about working to observe and improve the system of the core content for assessment and arts education across Kentucky schools. It's empowering to hear about schools' dedication to improving arts education and enrichment. Now I have two questions for you. For the first one here, you've worked in a lot of different schools from Kentucky to California. What kinds of differences have you seen in the arts and cultural offerings in the schools you have worked in? Are there any policies or practices you have seen work well that you would recommend implementing statewide in Kentucky?
Everywhere I've worked, there has been a common interest in providing arts and cultural education opportunities for students everywhere. Whether it be in Eastern Kentucky or the San Francisco Bay Area, that desire is there. The differences are that there is not always agreement as to what those experiences might involve, the depth of instruction and content provided, or the priorities might be different from location to location. It is also not always clear regarding the goals of arts and cultural education from location to location. Practices and policies that seem to work in terms of a unified, equitable education overall tend to involve model curriculum standards and academic standards that are adopted nationally and or statewide. In California, I experienced model curriculum standards and even provided professional development and training in those areas across the state for consistency. I also served as a project director for the development of the current national standards for arts education, and those standards have since been adopted and are under regulation here in Kentucky. They've been Kentuckyized, but it's the same standards. These standards help to ensure a more consistent approach to curriculum and instruction, but they do not guarantee equity and access to arts education. This is an area where I would suggest that the state has the responsibility to step in and define what students are entitled to and spell that out clearly in statute and regulations that schools must follow. For example, Ms. Dewey spoke earlier about a bill that would guarantee students a set number of uninterrupted minutes per week in arts instruction, and you heard that previously. Such a bill would at least guarantee a certain amount of access and equity in instruction. Combined with standards, we would see a certain amount of consistency across Kentucky.
Thank you so much for your insight. Moving on to my second question. Currently, Kentucky awards arts credits to students based on seat time, with 120 hours of instruction granting a student 1 credit. From my own experience, this rule has led to many students, quote unquote, going through the motions of art classes rather than being enriched by their artistic and cultural content. In both your teaching and nonprofit experiences, what kinds of policies or programs do you think would lead to greater engagement and buy-in among students in art classes? Do you think a competency-based credit model measuring student progress through demonstrated mastery of skills and knowledge, which is used by many other states, would help in Kentucky?
It's funny, we're talking about the Carnegie unit here in old Carnegie building. I will start by saying these are really tough questions because there are no clear-cut answers. First, I would say that engagement comes with opportunity for engagement. When I worked at the Kentucky Department of Education, we reviewed the minimum graduation requirement regulation to make recommendations to the Kentucky Board of Education for adoption. At that time, the only way for students to fulfill the graduation requirement was to take a course titled History and Appreciation of Visual and Performing Arts, which was a survey course in the arts, and the content was somewhat defined, including historical and cultural context of the 4 art forms that we were measuring and that were on in the standards at that time. We had heard from the field that students were having to drop out of their performance-based classes in music, art, theater, and so on to take this class, the survey course. A few schools had dance programs, and that was also true with dance in those cases. Surveys produced data which clearly showed that schools wanted to use the performance-based classes to be able to fulfill the graduation requirement for visual and performing arts. A large supporting reason for that request was student engagement. There were so many students that were taking that class and were not engaged in the format of the class. Students were not as interested in learning about the arts as they were in doing the arts. The requirement was changed so that student interest and engagement would be revived. In other words, the students could take those performance-based classes to fulfill the graduation requirement. That said, I believe that students who do the arts are naturally more engaged than those who solely focus on the historical and cultural aspects of the arts, although that is still highly important. As for competency-based credit, there are pluses and minuses in that approach. In my experience and conversation with other states who offer competency-based credit, it seems to work for some students, while not for others. There are many students who need consistent guidance to complete courses and content, who tend to fall into tend to fail in competency-based instructional situations, while others feel that they are held back because of having to follow the regular schedule of weekly classes, who may benefit greatly from competency-based credit. In Kentucky, there are some options for what we tend to call independent study. Once the course is completed, as outlined, the student is finished, no matter how long that takes. That is based on student passing assessments and meeting required competencies of the course. These courses nowadays are often computer-based and asynchronous, meaning that the student can engage in the course anytime they wish. My personal experience. In college, I took a history course through independent study. I had 1 semester to complete the course. 2 days before the end of the semester, I went to the library to start the course. I lived in the library for 2 days, felt like 2 years, but completed the course and showed the professor the results of my work. I passed with a C, but truthfully, I do not remember anything that I learned, except not to put myself in that situation again. Was that a pass or a fail? Case 2, my grandson. He was beginning his senior year of high school. He hated going to school each day. He'd been highly successful. His grades had always been good. He was bored out of his mind. He only had 2 courses to complete for graduation, just 2. He had no intention of going to college after school, and he wanted to get out into the workforce as soon as he could. So, he went to his guidance counselor to discuss his situation, and she told him that he could take his 2 courses online. He did not have to attend school while he was doing that. He was thrilled. He immediately got to work on those courses and finished both within a week, with high grades for both courses. Frankly, I have no idea as to what he learned, but he did well. Was that a pass or a fail? Public education is for everyone, and we need to work our hardest to individualize instruction for every student. That presents many challenges. Competency-based credit can be a wonderful opportunity for students in the right situation. But we also need to accommodate those who would not fare as well in that kind of environment. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Locketts, and I'm a senior at Eminence Independent High School. I would now like to welcome our 3rd witness, Ms. Heather Lyons, who is the former community liaison and project manager for public art projects in Lexington. Please share your testimony whenever you're ready.
I'm really delighted to be here today to discuss arts and education and to support the really important work of KSVT. I appreciate the work that you're doing and really bringing such awareness, not just about the arts, but to Kentucky's education overall. So thank you for your work. First, I want to give you a little more information about myself, as my comments today are going to focus on my personal experiences working in and for the arts in Kentucky. Primarily, my work was as a partner of, but outside the public school system. First, I want to mention I grew up in Lexington, attending public schools and enjoying a fairly robust access to the arts through elementary, middle, and high school. After graduation from college, I moved into a career in television and as an independent documentary filmmaker. But it was, in fact, an experience that I had with artist-in-residence filmmakers in my own classroom in what was then junior high school that inspired my professional career. I worked out of state for several years, and when I returned to Lexington, I became an artist-in-resident with the Living Arts and Science Center in Lexington. My work and the work of dozens of talented and dedicated teaching artists across the state was funded at that time by the Kentucky Arts Council, the state agency. Excuse me. The KAC at that time was a very robust arts resource with an application process for selecting Kentucky artists from a wide range of arts disciplines to become part of their teaching artist directory. Schools could apply for funding to bring teaching artists into their schools. The Artist Residence Program was intended to be a statewide resource and to help schools provide arts education for all students. I began this work around 1991, the early days of the Kentucky Education Reform Act. CARA mandated the arts as core curriculum subject, which meant that the arts were no longer only available as elective classes. After a 2-year residency in Lexington, I then began residencies in other parts of the state and continued this work for about 11 years. My experience ranged from very small elementary schools in extremely rural, high poverty districts to large high schools in Kentucky's larger towns. Residencies might last anywhere from 3 weeks to a full calendar year. I'm highlighting this Artist-in-Residence program today as the arts and education grants to schools provided a successful structure for broadening and deepening access to the arts within Kentucky's classrooms. Some of the primary benefits were extensive planning was facilitated between school teachers and teaching artists when receiving grants. The KAC hosted 3 to 5 day planning retreats for teachers and artists selected for the Art Ed grants. The retreat provided time for in-depth planning and professional development for the teachers and artists as they learned from a variety of arts and education presenters. The residencies focused on integrating arts across the curriculum. This focus significantly increased opportunities for students to participate in the arts outside of the designated art classroom. The arts shouldn't only be available on the day and time that you open up the art cabinet or the music room. Throughout time, the arts have been a consequence and activity of everyday life and daily expression. My residencies sometimes included working with teachers in art classrooms, but more frequently, I worked with teachers and students in Spanish language classes, English classes, industrial arts, social studies, and math classes, and in many elementary school classrooms, 1st through 5th grades. The residencies brought the arts into general classrooms, ensuring equal opportunity and access for all students. Students were exposed to different ways of learning and could expand skills and interests, which increased confidence and self-esteem, positively impacting all areas of their academic and social life. During the residencies, professional development sessions were available to teachers in the participating schools, providing them with ideas, tools, and lesson plans for integrating the arts into their classrooms. Professional development helped teachers identify new ways to teach subjects through the arts and increased non-arts teachers' preparedness and comfort level with art integration. The arts engaged the school, the parents, and the community, creating a sense of celebration and ownership. The arts are unique in this way. There were opportunities for collaboration, for introducing them to guest artists, often from their own community, exploring local history and assets, and presenting the artwork for the community. Unfortunately, since the early 2000s, when I stopped participating as an artist in residence and moved into more administrative work in the arts, there's been a continued decline in funding of the Kentucky Arts Council from our state legislature. The Kentucky Arts Council's funding level is now just 40% of what it was in 2001, far less when adjusted for inflation. The current Teaching Art Together program is only available for residencies of 1 to 10 days. Understandably, the school's focus is often to expose all of their students to the arts within that short period of time, and so residencies are often geared towards single performances for large school assemblies or 1 or 2 time artist presentations in multiple classrooms. The severe reduction of this program is an enormous loss to arts education across the state, though there is value in everything that I just mentioned, absolutely. A couple of years after I had completed my last residency, I accepted the position as executive director of the Living Arts and Science Center in Lexington. This nonprofit organization creates participatory educational experiences for all ages in the arts and sciences. The center had had a long history of providing established in-school art programs with teaching artists, primarily for schools with predominantly low-income students. The LASC raised funds for these programs and typically provided them at no cost to the schools or students. At that time, multicultural education was required and included within social studies, geography, languages, history, and other subject areas. The arts are the perfect vehicle for sharing cultural traditions, and one particularly successful program focused on the art and culture of Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. This project not only created multidisciplinary experiences in traditional art forms, but it also provided very positive cultural exchange and appreciation for students from Spanish-speaking households. However, tweaking of Kentucky's educational systems was ongoing, and teachers were impacted by the revisions to Kentucky's core content and program of studies and the eventual adoption of Kentucky's Common Core state standards. It was during this time that teachers seemed to lose some freedom to design and schedule their own classroom. Teachers expressed to us at that time that they no longer had time within the school day for other than what was required. Arts organizations then looked for other ways to provide arts education to students and to assist their public school systems. I often referred to it as bringing the arts in through the back door, because we had to find new and different ways to reach students at school. After school classes were an alternative. However, this greatly reduces student access due to a lack of transportation. The LASC partnered with several schools on 21st century grants and other types of grant programs, designing after-school arts programs for students, especially struggling academically. Though tracking quantitative benefits for the arts is always difficult, there were always clear improvements to the students' school attendance, reduction in behavioral disruptions, and improvement in homework completion. And as is typical, the pride and pleasure of students with time to create and succeed in new ways was palpable. We additionally saw parents' interest and participation increased as they witnessed their children's art experiences. We have continued to see a serious erosion of access to the arts in schools and a lack of equitable or consistent arts opportunities for students. This includes a significant reduction of teachers in the arts in our schools and, of course, a reduction in time dedicated to participation in the arts. Some schools have adopted an arts and humanities position that requires an entire school that serves an entire school, stretching one person's knowledge, time, and experience too thin. Some schools are relying on parents or other volunteers to provide arts nights or after-school programs. These are great as supplemental options, but the arts, as with other academic subjects, should consist and be taught by arts specialists. The arts are treated as optional and extracurricular, and so are accessible only to students with after-school transportation and/or funds to pay for tuition-based programs. And schools often depend upon other community partners to provide arts programs. There are wonderful partnerships that exist with skilled and dedicated arts professionals providing programs, and these are vital to continue. However, these are generally for specific geographic regions, as they are not funded or equipped to serve the entire state. And if they are the only option, this can be a heavy burden for nonprofit organizations, which often are struggling to find their own funding and are vulnerable to inconsistent or unreliable support. Over the decades, there have been scores of studies that identify the enormous benefits of the students engaged in the arts. You've certainly heard so many of those attributes from my previous panelists. These are all true. And there's so many more. We really could just sit here all day and talk about nothing about the benefits that students derive from participating in the arts. But I suggest that the arts are even more important today, as stress and tensions are greater for students now. Beyond the ability to connect students with any subject matter or discipline, the arts also have the ability to soothe, to reduce anxiety, and to help students gain greater understanding of themselves and others. And the arts are a necessity to supply the individuals needed in the creative arts industries. Education in the arts prepares students for so many career pathways that are accessible through colleges and trade schools. Skills developed through the arts are transferable to any career, and employers still consider creativity as one of the most important and hardest to find traits amongst employees. To successfully bring the arts back into our schools and to serve the mandate that exists, I would advocate for a multi-tiered structure to include, of course, legislation that requires participation in the arts for grades K through 12 across the curriculum and to be taught by arts specialists. An education budget across the Commonwealth that will appropriately support arts education for K through 12 students for every district in the state. Expanded funding and expanded arts and education staff for the Kentucky Arts Council to rebuild teaching artist training, fund in-school residencies, and provide professional development for classroom teachers. Include basic arts training for all undergraduate education programs at colleges and university, and initiate arts ed and non-arts ed education partnerships. Identify and support regional resources such as nonprofits and colleges and universities to provide arts and education programs and assist with developing partnerships with area schools. And finally, to require schools to equitably promote and support arts students and arts departments, their initiatives and accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Your insight to decreasing support for long-term artist and residency partnerships in schools is very interesting and seems to speak to an overall decline in support for arts and cultural education. We'll now turn to questions. I have two for you. First is, according to a recent study, 35% of districts reduced or eliminated arts programs between 2008 and 2018. What were the main causes of those cuts? What can be done to ensure that students like me don't continue to lose access to arts education?
Thank you. Again, I'm speaking as a partner of school systems, but not from within the school system. But in looking back, the results of several policy and funding trends led to a significant reduction of education in and through the arts. Specifically, between 2008 and 18, there was Senate Bill 1 in 2009, which adopted the Common Core Standards, later known as the Kentucky Core Academic Standards. This shifted the emphasis toward standardized college prep classes and classes that supported standardized testing. School districts reallocated funds to support other academic areas and eliminated arts positions, as well as time for the arts in the school day. The whole shift in assessment that occurred during this time seemed to force a prioritization of curriculum, and so led to a downward spiral for arts education. Then, of course, also during this period of time, there was an enormous reduction in our state and federal funding of education. Kentucky's SEEK funding was reduced significantly, causing extreme hardship for school districts, which again and again had to reprioritize their resources and use more local funding for things the state had previously paid for. Basic needs such as bus transportation and maintenance, student health services, and even purchasing textbooks became very big challenges for local districts and contributed to the 35% reduction or elimination in arts education. Sadly, that reduction in funding is continuing right up to today. According to the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, in their analysis of January 27, 2026, the proposed House budget proposes more huge reductions in education funding that continues, and I quote, a 20-year pattern of allowing school funding to fall further behind the cost of living. Already, total SEEK funding was 25% below 2008 levels after adjusting for inflation, end of quote. Of course, if that House budget bill goes forward with those education cuts, it's going to further exacerbate this continued reduction and difficulty. The arts are often considered optional. They are the first to go when there are budget restraints. When these cuts are made and the arts are reduced or eliminated, then that becomes the norm. Sometimes parents and students don't even realize what has been lost. It is a continual erosion that ends up washing away what had been there before. Certainly the work that KSVT is doing now is so important, bringing attention to the fact that Kentucky is falling far short of upholding the legal requirements regarding education in the arts. This has been a fact now for decades. With about 85,000 to 95,000 students beginning elementary school each year in Kentucky, there are now many hundreds of thousands of students who have not received consistent, sufficient, or in some cases, any access to the arts. It is important for parents, students, and teachers to hold their own schools and school districts accountable, and to maintain that the arts be funded and sustained through sequential and in-depth arts education by arts specialists and for all students. The arts are essential. We should consistently state that as fact and make sure that the arts are included within every conversation regarding education, our schools, our communities, and our health. School administrators, school boards, and others need to hear that more is expected regarding the arts so that they know there is genuine need and interest. Advocacy for the arts is really critical at every level.
Thank you for your insight. My second question is, how does a community arts presence positively impact public school students who lack access to arts education within the classroom? How can we increase interaction between community arts and public schools?
Well, these are all such great questions. A local arts community is just a tremendous resource for students, parents, teachers, and schools. As schools have reduced access to the arts, many nonprofit arts organizations and other community partners have tried to develop programs and opportunities to help fill some of those gaps. Arts organizations are interested in sharing the arts with their community and are usually very enthusiastic partners and collaborators. Identifying local arts groups or arts venues can be a start to see what is going on around you. You may find weekend, after-school and summer programs, performances, exhibits, workshops, and other arts activities. Just finding the places where art is happening can be a great way to learn across arts disciplines and to become familiar with artists and arts resources in your own community. Some organizations may offer internship or volunteer opportunities, which enable students to work with and learn from arts professionals and artists. Seeking out individual artists can also be a great way to find those who might be interested in mentoring or teaching or have knowledge about other local resources. Attending local fairs, festivals, and bazaars in your community is another way to meet visual artists, writers, and performers. I encourage students and schools to reach out to arts organizations and artists in their communities and see what kind of collaborations or partnerships might be possible. There could be the opportunity to collaborate on a grant or to develop a community sponsor, to bring artists into your school, or to provide arts field trips opportunities for students. I believe that inviting local artists, arts organizations, and community leaders to a meeting to discuss the desire to develop more arts education opportunities for students could generate great energy and ideas. There's honestly nothing better to do than to have a room full of artists and arts advocates and brainstorm about what can be done to increase that. The Kentucky Arts Council offers grants to bring artists into schools and to provide transportation funds for taking students on arts field trips. So identifying potential partners for these programs can be very helpful. You can also talk to your city or county government. If there are no or few arts opportunities within your community, then talk with your local government and let them know that the arts need to be included in their community services. Perhaps there is a community center that can start offering arts classes. Maybe there is a local business or government building where art exhibits could be hung, or perhaps there's a restaurant or coffee shop that might start an open mic night or poetry slam. Again, I think it is important to let them know that there are local needs and desires that are not being met for arts access in the community. And there are other resources to reach out to, such as public libraries, colleges or universities, churches, and ag extension offices. The University of Kentucky has a Kentucky Community Arts Extension staff that works statewide to develop and support arts education in Kentucky. They have 2 staff members that work statewide and staff members located in 8 regions of Kentucky. They are an excellent resource as well. I really could go on, but I want to emphasize that people who work in the arts are generous and passionate and eager to share. So reaching out to one person or organization can easily put you on a path to finding many more. If you aren't sure of even one possible place to start in your community, you could start by calling the Kentucky Arts Council, which would be able to steer you toward resources closest to you.
That concludes our questions for you, Ms. Lyons. Thank you for your responses, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
As you return to your seat, I'm going to pass it off to Ash to introduce our final witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashton Boyer, and I'm a junior at Eastern High School and a member of KSVT. Our final witness today is Ms. Paula Lockhart. Ms. Lockhart is an active theater artist in the Louisville community and the Associate Director of Governor School for the Arts. Welcome, Ms. Lockhart, and thank you again for being here today. You may start your testimony whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Good. How are you? Okay. Love. I'm doing good. I'm so happy to be here. First things first, I have to say it. And I know a couple of people in the crowd already know what I'm talking about, so just be ready, okay? Hey, GSA. Yes, GSA alums. We got some GSA alums in the house. Absolutely. I am beyond thrilled and grateful for the opportunity to discuss the importance of arts education in Kentucky. I would be remiss if I didn't start by giving the members and supporters of the Kentucky Student Voice Team a round of applause. So let's give them a round of applause. Let's take a moment. Thank you. During a time when voices, especially minority voices, are being silenced, you all have done what many adults with fully formed frontal lobes have trouble doing: speaking up, advocating for yourself. I think it's important to acknowledge that the space that you all have created. And I'll be honest, when I was thinking about my testimony, imposter syndrome just fell over me like the heavy snow that fell over the state a few weeks ago. Do y'all remember that? Yeah?
How can we forget?
Listen, also, I'm all about extemporaneous. You all can jump in. If something makes you laugh, you can laugh. If something makes you respond, we want you to respond. So yeah, the snow. I said, why me? What is my impact? Who have I affected? I feel I still have so much more to learn so that I continue my work as an arts advocate. And then it dawned on me that multiple things are true at once. I can acknowledge the nerves and my passion for growth without discounting my journey and the work I have accomplished thus far. So if you remember nothing else from my testimony, remember this. On this journey of life, never let perfect be the enemy of good. Choose action over perfection and watch the flowers around you bloom. I came to the Commonwealth for its robust art scene. I am a Georgia peach. I hail from St. Mary's, Georgia. It's as far south as you can be without being in Florida. And I'm a graduate of Wesleyan College, the first all-female college in the world. With degrees in theater and communication, I was still so incredibly nervous. In winter 2013, I was a senior in college, and I could feel that graduation itch. Do we have any seniors in high school in the room? Raise your hand, let's hear something. Yeah, you feel that itch? Yeah. What will I do next? Where will I go? I need a job. All the what ifs. I brought all that anticipation and those nerves with me to the annual Southeastern Theater Conference, also known as SETC. SETC is a premier theater conference that is a great space for theater practitioners, undergraduate students, graduate students, and professional actors alike. So one of the great things about SETC is that it's not hosted at the same place every year. It rotates. I will say, like in 2026, it's going to be in Chattanooga. But in 2013, March 2013, it was held in Louisville, Kentucky. When I arrived in Louisville, I was blown away. Literally. It was so cold, I had to go get an extra coat. I was not used to the wind. But the conference was so magical. It was there that I decided I will go to graduate school and I will become an arts educator. And then the best icing on the cake was that I got accepted to the University of Louisville's Theater Arts Master of Performing Arts program to do so. So Louisville is my artistic home and also a force to be reckoned with. My lens as an arts advocate is through my work as a theater artist and arts administrator. So what's interesting, I'm no longer at the Governor's School of the Arts. However, in my new position as the Center Director of Mathnasium, I see so many GSA kiddos and so many folks who are interested in the arts. And it makes me think about the concept that there is room for everybody. We do not need to sacrifice arts education to uplift the education of STEM. So I believe that, let me back up a little bit. So before I was at GSA, I was a teaching artist. So if you're a person who is a musician or any type of artist, learn that phrase, teaching artist. That means that you are going to go out into different communities, you could be going out into schools, and you are going to be teaching them. It's a little different from a K through 12 educator, still incredibly important. I was also an adjunct educator at Simmons College, the first HBCU in Kentucky. And through all of these experiences, I walked away thinking about something I call AAA, not like the car, but acceptance, access, and advocacy in arts education. I believe that is the responsibility of all, not just the artists and their supporters, to grow access to arts education. To me, that means that even if you do not have a voice like Tyler Childers or the ability to present a slice of Appalachian life like painter Sierra Evans, the beautiful Kentuckian artist, still support the artistic efforts in your own communities. So let's start by talking about acceptance. Art is ephemeral, meaning that while the act itself lasts a short time, the emotions that it gave you and the impact that you felt will last a lifetime. So I'd like everyone to take a moment, close your eyes, think about the artistic experience that you had that gave you that everlasting impact. I'll tell you mine. I was in 5th grade and I was bullied because of my size. Kids can be cruel, but that's okay. My mom was there and my mom picked me up from school. I told her all about my day and she said, "Do you want to see a play?" And I said, "A play? What is a play? What does that even mean?" And she said, "Don't worry, we're going to get into it." So we went to see our community theater's production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. I can't say what my favorite line in the play was. I can't say my favorite actor. I cannot even remember the funniest part of it. But what I do remember is walking away with a deep sense and a deep responsibility to make folks feel as great as I felt when I walked out of that show. And I decided the way that I was going to do that was through theater. So as I've shared my moments, I want you to think about your artistic experience, how old you were, and how you continue to share that forward. Something that we have to get comfortable with as artists is talking about our art and talking about our impact. And sometimes we have a hard time doing it, but that's okay. We got to get better at it. So when we talk about acceptance, for me that means accepting the fact that art is important and has its place in society. The art that you enjoy may not be the same that the next person enjoys, but that's okay. We are not a monolith. We are designed to represent the best of our world, and art has the ability to do so. So I'd like to see less infighting between artistic mediums, because even if you do not know how to paint, like me, I can't paint at all, I can still acknowledge the beauty of an oil painting and acknowledge the hard work that a painter put into it. I cannot speak about acceptance without emphasizing, the importance of familial and community support for young artists. During my time at GSA, I was able to see young artists whose families would move heaven and earth for them to participate. And in the same vein, I was saddened by the number of students who had no support when it came to their participation in GSA. A lot of this stems from the age-old thought that you can never make a living being an artist, and that is simply not true. One of the great things about Kentucky is there are so many avenues for artists. One example is that at GSA, all of the guests, I will say a good 75% of the guest artists, all of our residential advisors or our discipline assistants, our faculty members, a few who I've seen in the audience, they're Kentuckians. They're here, and in this way, we're feeding into the Kentucky economy. The idea that your life is not successful or brilliant unless you make a ton of money is false. I encourage everyone to think about how, in this capitalist society that we live in, how art still feeds us. COVID, 2020. It feels like so long ago. Well, it's 6 years ago, but doesn't feel like that long ago. It feels like yesterday. And you know, what got me through staying in my home when I didn't want to, was art. Reading books like Percy Jackson and the Olympians, reading To Kill a Mockingbird, or reading the plays of August Wilson and Dominique Morisseau, listening to music. I even started watching reruns of Bob Ross and learned a little bit about painting, not a lot though. But art gave me purpose at a time when I felt like I had none. Every notable artist you see being highlighted across social media or the internet for their big break or their starring role or their Grammy all started somewhere. They started with support. And we have to be that voice that gives folks support. Excuse me. I think when we begin to accept art for all that it is, we will have the ability to show more support to our young artists. We will have the courage to have frank conversations with them about making a living as an artist, about the highs and the lows, about the fact that sometimes art may not be enough to support you, but that's okay. You will make it. You will learn other skills that will help pay your bills. We need art advocates who will not just say how beautiful things are, but who will also take the time to talk about the realities of life, such as paying taxes as an artist. What does it mean to be an independent contractor? Managing your time. Access. Kentucky has 120 counties. Therefore, enhancing statewide access to arts education is a nuanced issue that deserves a nuanced solution. And I will not sit before you and tell you that I have every solution, because I do not. But I do know the way that we start is by understanding what specific barriers and inequalities different communities face. For example, at GSA, we would create something that is known as a heat map, and we would catalog the counties in which we have got a lot of GSA applications from, and the counties where we have got few applications from. And then we would take on targeted initiatives. So those initiatives can look like reaching out to folks. It can look like seeing who in that community we know, who in that community is an alum, and asking them to speak for us. Excuse me. So there was never a shortage of applications in Fayette County or Jefferson County or Oldham County, but that is because they have a greater access than counties like Livingston, Fleming, Hancock, or Muhlenberg. But that does not make any student's art less deserving of an experience like GSA. So how do we begin to increase those numbers in rural counties? Well, it starts by communication. Simply letting schools know and community groups know that GSA exists, telling them about the benefits of the program, and at times that can look like a Zoom presentation, or my personal favorite, traveling across the state to speak to guidance counselors, principals, educators, and being an in-person resource for them. You take the time to learn about the makeup of their schools. Educators have so much to do on any given day that sometimes an email is simply not enough. For students who have a robust arts offering, I encourage institutions and educators to dive deeper and be critical. Are we teaching artists that fully represent our entire student base? You know, we love the work of playwrights like Tennessee Williams, but what about uplifting different voices, like Indigenous playwright Larissa Fasthorse, who wrote the Thanksgiving play, or the plays In Butterfly and Yellowface by David Henry Hwang, or Diana Sun in her seminal work, Stop Kiss. We have to be conscious that not everyone looks the same, but that doesn't mean that they should not still have their art represented. Let folks know that there are more options to being an artist than being an actor. We need everyone. We need arts administration, we need technicians, we need grants writers. All of these things are possible. Advocacy. So advocacy can be done in a few ways, big and small, but you can start by whichever artistic medium you enjoy. Find a company in your community and support them the same way you would a Broadway production or even the Philharmonic. For me, that looks like sitting on the board at Kentucky Shakespeare and seeing their shows. And hey, if you cannot purchase a ticket, you can share a social media post. When you are asked, or even when the spirit moves you, be vocal about the impact that art has had on you your community and the lives of others. Your voice is a powerful tool, and you should use it for greatness. Remember that art is subjective. There is no right or wrong. There is only the process. Be understanding of the process, and don't value the perfection over it. Take the time to explore. In these ways, I think that we can tackle the challenge that is arts education, or expanding arts education in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on arts and cultural education. I have 2 questions for you. When I recently attended an art showcase at a local theater, I saw students light up when their own cultural traditions were presented on the stage. Drawing from your experience at GSA, how can schools intentionally integrate Kentucky's diverse cultural traditions into art curriculum so that students see their own communities and identities reflected in what they're learning?
That's a beautiful question, and I think ultimately it starts with conversation. Learning about the student base, learning what they want to see. Learning about them more than just like this student in my orchestra or this student in this advanced drama class. Learn about their culture. And I know this is all in a perfect world, right? We can only do so much, educators can only do so much, but start with that conversation and encourage them to look for art and to help them look for art that speaks to their cultures. I think something that I'll say theater in particular that we have to work through is being so exclusive, right? We need to be opening this up for everybody. Folks don't want to participate in things when they don't see themselves. So if we have powerful tools like a budget, a theater, or whatever, use those tools to support more than just the folks who look like you.
I really appreciate hearing your perspective on this. When you're ready, I'd love to ask you another question.
Absolutely.
Based on your experience at GSA, what specific support should regular schools start offering to students to help them pursue career pathways in the arts and feel more comfortable in doing so?
That's a brilliant question. When I read it, it really got my mind kind of thinking, like, what can we do, right? I think something that is vastly underrated is reaching out to organizations in your community who maybe do things that you've heard your students are interested in. For example, if you know that if you're in Louisville and you have a class who really wants to learn about arts administration, I can think of like a dozen arts administrators on my brain, right? Take the time to ask them, hey, can you come speak to my class about this? There are people who might have questions. If you know that a specific student has a specific need when it comes to arts, do your best to try to help them feel included. Something that I think should be incredibly prevalent is accessibility in the arts. A lot of people have learning disabilities. A lot of folks are neurodivergent, and that is okay. I am an ADHD baddie myself. But that means that you need to take the time to think about how your teaching methods may or may not be supporting that person and invest a little more in that. Again, this is all in a perfect world. I know that educators have so much to do, and the last thing they need is someone telling them to learn a different learning style or teach a different learning style, but that's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you for your time and for sharing your insights with us today. Please join me in thanking all of our witnesses today for their dedication to Kentucky students, for their commitment to arts and cultural education, and for their time and testimony today. Thank you all.
That was amazing. I'm so sad because our time is short, but we gathered a group of artists in here. We knew that was going to happen. Thank you so much to all of our amazing expert witnesses and our student examiners.
And thanks to all of you in the audience for spending your precious Saturday afternoon with us. We hope you'll stay connected with the Kentucky Student Voice Team and our Rose Revival campaign. There are several meaningful ways you can do that, and since we have a bit of a captive audience, we'd love to take a moment to share them with you. At each of your tables, you will find a QR code that takes you to our webpage. There, you can stay up to date on legal proceedings and follow our hearing schedule by signing up for the Kentucky Student Voice Team's digital newsletter. What else to know? In January, the Kentucky Student Voice Team released a book about our Rose Revival campaign and litigation. Woo! Yes! Come on, somebody. Why Kentucky students are suing the state takes a deep look at the Rose legacy, breaks down our historic legal complaint, and explains why the stakes are so high. The book is available for digital download for free on our website and also for purchase as a paperback and hardcover on Amazon. Details about all of this and several more ways to get involved with us are available on ksvt.org/rose. And with that, we conclude our Rose Revival hearing on arts and cultural education. We are officially adjourned. Thank you again for showing up and standing, Kentucky students. Please feel free to stay around and connect with our witnesses and student examiners. And as with any good court, we trust you will deliberate carefully over the snack table. Period.